All right, this next show is Popcorn Psychology.
Hi. Hi, so I'll jump into it. We're Popcorn Psychology. We are 3 therapists that actually work out of a private practice in the Lakeview neighborhood in Chicago. It's called Ardent Counseling Center. My name is Brittany. I'm a child therapist. And
my name is Ben. I'm an individual therapist.
My name is Hannah Espinoza-Rimas, and I'm a marriage and family therapist.
So we kind of have slightly different specialties, but we all work together. And so basically what this podcast is, which Ben kind of touched upon with the last one, is we take pop culture movies, like blockbuster movies, and we kind of psychoanalyze them. And our episodes are like long as hell, like an hour and a half. So this is going to be a very much a bridge version, because usually we pick several themes out, then we end it with like, how would we treat this person if they walked into our office? Like if Darth Vader came to therapy, how would we break that down? And so this is going to be a shortened version. So today we're going to talk about Mean Girls. More specifically, we're going to address the topic of, is Regina George a sociopath? And so, because usually we will break up into several things and talk about different parts of the movie, but we got to keep it short and simple. So I guess to start out with, most people I think are familiar with the show Mean Girls, or the movie Mean Girls. It's basically about Lindsay Lohan's character, Katie, is a homeschooled kid who finally goes to school, public school for the first time at 16, and kind of learns the wild that is public school and the social norms, and more specifically, the mean girls, the popular girls, the plastics, the Barbies, led by Regina George, a.k.a. Rachel McAdams, who is painted as probably one of the most, watching it as a therapist, maybe one of the most evil characters we have yet to talk about. And we've done Star Wars, we've done Sixth Sense, we've done Anchorman, we've done 50 Shades of Grey, like we do a wide variety of movies. And she might take the cake. Well, she's probably up there in terms of maybe the most intentionally hateful person we've talked about.
The most malicious, for sure.
So I guess what I want to break down as well is that these are fake make-believe characters. And so when we do talk about diagnoses with them, we're based on someone who wasn't written to fit into a diagnosis or a category. So some of it's going to feel maybe off base. And we're not diagnosing like this is what a person with this diagnosis would always look like. We don't want to be uncaring in that way, because these are fake people. So basically, I guess we'll jump into in that sociopaths aren't really a real thing. I guess that's the first thing.
It's not a diagnosis.
It's not a diagnosis. They're real. They exist, but it's not a diagnosis that's listed in the DSM-5, which is the manual that we use for all diagnoses that exist in the mental health world.
It's like the therapy dictionary or Bible. Like all the diagnoses live in there, and that's how we figure it out. The sociopath's like I would call it a movie word. It's a movie TV word that people throw around, like psychopath. That's not, you wouldn't find either of those words in the DSM, I don't think.
No.
They'd be accounted for by personality disorders or psychotic disorders, depending on what the presentation is. But the debate about Regina certainly gets interesting real quick when we start looking at what symptoms she actually shows and how those would be presented in an actual clinical setting.
Because when people say sociopath, the closest actual diagnosis is what we call antisocial personality disorder.
Right.
And that's also something people say a lot too, like, oh, he's antisocial, which isn't just like you don't like to go outside and you have no friends. That's not what antisocial means.
No.
It means what you think a sociopath is, or like a movie villain character that's like one-dimensional.
Right, manipulative, no remorse.
Yeah, no feelings.
No, uses other people, sees other people as a means to an end, might hurt animals or people. A person with antisocial personality disorder has a tendency to get involved in situations that will get them arrested.
Yeah, they definitely, I guess one of the most telling things is they don't seem to care about social norms, like the laws of man or the laws of
the actual laws.
Culture, or like how do you make friends and how do you keep friends and how do you function at a job and how do you portray yourself in a way that is typical or quote-unquote normal or within the standards of normal behavior. So the debate we had before we even got here today is basically,
We had a therapist fight.
That's why Brittany is in the middle of being Ben.
Because I'm going to play devil's advocate. Is is Regina George display more characteristics of what we call histrionic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder. Now, personality disorders, I'll do a little therapy explaining, is what we call the cluster B diagnoses in the DSM, which is the personality, all the personality disorders live. When we do our Anchorman episode, we go through like 3 different personality disorders at length. So if you want to get into that and what Ron Burgundy's deal is, that's where we talk about that. So histrionic, do you want to... Well, I guess here I'll go by... Histrionic is Ben's take. Antisocial is Hannah's take. So I'll let them go to town on that.
Right, yeah, so we'll get into that. With cluster... The important thing about the clusters to know is that the reason they exist is because people who exhibit these symptoms might show symptoms of all 4 of the personality disorders that fit in this group. So when we talk about Regina, she's going to show these characteristics of all, which is histrionic, antisocial, borderline, and also narcissistic personality disorder. With her, it's a hard call for me between whether I think she's more narcissistic or histrionic, but for today, I'm going to settle on histrionic because a histrionic person might seem shallow and insincere, and we see that in Regina with the way that she has the manipulative reaction or interactions with people where she makes them think that she's their friend, and Katie has a big moment of clarity when she realizes
the complimenting and then the insult.
The complimenting and the insult that Regina talked to her the same way she talked to this other girl when it was clearly a manipulation.
That skirt is so fugly. After telling that girl that's so cute. That's a good point.
And they can be manipulative, sexually provocative, which we see with inappropriately so, and they need to be the center of attention. And once they become taken, or once that gets taken away from them, they become uncomfortable to the point where they are going to act out in order to retake that position as the queen. Or
Which I guess
of the situation.
You could argue that because let's take the example of Aaron Samuels, the boyfriend.
Right.
Is that she doesn't give a shit about him. She dumps him, very
cheats
dramatic,
on him.
like just whatever. And then as soon as Katie, Lindsay Lohan's character, has any sort of interest in him, she like jumps on him and screws all that up. I guess the kids aren't here, so I could swear. Screws all that up and takes him back just for the simple reason, it seems like, because Katie wanted him. So it's that sort of alpha dogging behavior where it's just to reestablish kind of that she's an alpha, that she's in control of the situation, and that she doesn't want anyone to have that attention if it's not her.
Correct. And that's where all the central conflicts of this movie derive from, is because Katie is starting to take the social status away from Regina. So for me, the way I interpret it is that I see this shallow person that cannot tolerate not being the queen, has sexually provocative behavior, has little regard for others outside of them giving her attention. Like, she needs other people around to like feed her attention and to feed her ability to be the center of everything. And I think that she develops or displays that pretty clearly.
And not to get soapboxy about it, but when we say like sexually provocative, I want to be sex positive about it for us young ladies out there. But I guess where she, I think, is more, where it rings a red flag of sexually provocative is some of the traits of like cheating on her boyfriend and not sure if she's being safe about it, being also like cheating and like having sex in school where people can find her pretty easily.
It's probably even more considered just high risk behaviors.
Yeah, having
And not
sex
even
like
necessarily
when her mom
sexually
comes.
provocative.
For sure.
Well, when her mom comes into the bedroom and is like, "Do you guys need any condoms? I love you guys so much." Like, she doesn't stop. She doesn't stop fooling around. Like, her mom walks in on her banging her boyfriend, and she just keeps going. And that's like a very odd. That would be a red flag.
Yeah.
Of more like a sexually provocative behavior, or like having the school dance be that Jingle Bell Rock, and like it's very sexual, and they're wearing very tight leather outfits and slapping their thighs. And I'm all for ladies feeling themselves, but to do that in that setting is odd when you really think about it.
Right, and they make a big point to show that in the movie, where they're showing how uncomfortable the parents and the teachers are with what's
When they
going
slap their
on.
thighs.
Right, when everyone starts going like whoa, because I mean these are adult women playing these characters and have clearly had time to invest in trainers, but when you like dial that back a second and go like, hold on though, like these are 16-year-olds, not 25-year-olds, like behaving like this in a professional setting, like where they're professional dancers or cheerleaders or anybody who may be like paid to be an entertainer. This is not that. These are high school girls at a talent show. Like, this is inappropriate.
And I think it's also another trait of histrionic is a preoccupation with your appearance. And I think we see that a lot with Regina in that here's where I'm already playing devil's advocate, is I think it's really hard, and we can get into this more later, is figuring out how much of this is her coming from her and how much is it a product of her environment and the culture that she's within. Because we could argue a lot of stuff with preoccupation with appearance, like when they do the thing where they're all standing in front of the mirror and they're all like shitting on themselves and picking themselves apart, and as soon as Katie doesn't play ball, they're like, excuse me, like, what do you hate about yourself, please? And then she's like, I guess, what did she say? I have really big pores or something, like something so stupid.
Yeah,
but then they're like,
really
yes,
silly.
now you're finally part of our clan because you hate yourself a little bit. And we need that hatred to fuel us all, because so I think, and we can go into this more later, it's hard to pick apart what is, and that's why, I guess we didn't say this, personality disorders aren't diagnosed until you're over 18. And I think a big reason of that is because you want to be a fully developed person before they give you that kind of diagnosis, because in the situations with Regina and her friends is they're still at an age where they're trying to figure out who they are and their identity and who they are outside of. And part of that is being highly critical of your appearance and your sexuality and kind of hating yourself because you're getting all these messages that aren't positive. And so part of why our argument is not clear for what's going on with her is because we would probably have to wait until she's a little bit older and kind of see what's sticking once she's kind of out of this horribleness that is high school.
Right, and you also want to make sure that they've had a chance to actualize a little bit as a human being outside of their environment of origin. Like, that was always going to impact who you are, but once people get out of the nest, they start to actualize and become more developed as a human being and individualize a little bit more. And you want to make sure before you even approach a diagnosis like this, which all personality disorders they're very serious diagnoses. You can work on them, but you're going to live with them forever. So it's before you give somebody something like that as a professional, you need to be very sure, and usually they've had to gone through testing with someone with a doctorate before you would approach that diagnosis.
Before you slap that on someone.
There's a lot of stigma attached to
stigma.
personality disorders just in general, and so making that decision about somebody who is 16, which is, she can't even, one of the things is you have to be over the age of 18, otherwise you can't fit the diagnosis no matter what. So she can't fit either one of these diagnoses because she's not 18. So automatically we're wrong. In this idea of this, but also that it's very, I think one of the things that all three of us really practice as clinicians is trying to make sure that we give the least diagnosis that we can. Because the truth of the matter is, whether or not you have depression or anxiety or struggle with PTSD or whatever the case may be, I'm going to meet you where you are and help you with whatever you feel like you need help with. And the diagnosis doesn't necessarily matter that much in that setting. In all honesty and truthfulness, it's really for insurance.
Right, and the thing too, like, we have to be conscious of is that with diagnosing, like, now that the Affordable Care Act is in place, more mental health is covered. And more people are using their insurance than pay cash. So in order to be reimbursed as a professional, we have to have a diagnosis. So we usually try to be as minimally invasive with that and conscious of that as possible. Like, if you're presenting with anxiety, but you might have personality disorder symptoms, before we ever put that in documentation, we could treat that without putting that on a document. But we would put, like, okay, so they've got anxiety. Anxiety is not viewed as a high-risk situation that if something were to get repealed ever, there would be a risk of not getting insured or having problems with your rates going up or having life insurance issues, which having a chronic diagnosis might. So we have to keep that in mind when we do that.
We're trying to say some therapists are looking out for you all. We're not just eager to be like, ooh, look at that mess. Let's give her the weirdest diagnosis we can.
We're gonna do
because I'm going to write a book about this later and get my name everywhere.
And also, and the other thing is with diagnosing personality disorders, it is not something that you come in and just we give it to you at your first or after seeing you 2 or 3 times. This is something that you give over maybe 6 months or more, because there's so many different parts, and really, people come in for 1 hour. We can act however we want for 1 hour. It's only 1 hour a week. So the chance that you would be able that Regina comes in, you're like, oh, she's got antisocial personality disorder. It's like, no, she might come in with maybe anxiety or anger struggles, and you're like, okay, and then like in the back, you're like, oh man, it feels like there may be something else going on here, but also that's not what she's coming here for, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, I mean, I would point this, and I'll switch it into you.
Yeah.
If she were to have anti-personality disorder, do you feel like she would even tell you that or tell you the truth if you were to work with her?
No.
No.
So, what's your argument with Regina in terms of Antisocial?
The things that I saw in Regina in this movie really are more that she is... It feels like she's more intentional in the shitty stuff that she does versus, in my opinion, with Histrionic is somebody who is more triggered and is
Out of a state of distress.
Out of a state of distress is where that they're trying to do these things where she's messing with her friends. She's doing that because she has to maintain control. In my opinion, she's so calm when she makes... Some of the most damaging things that she does are the phone calls, right? Where she calls the one friend and the other friend is listening. She is really calm when she does that. She's not upset. She's intentionally taking people and making chaos. And in my opinion, that is something that somebody with antisocial... why is it so effing hard to say? Antisocial personality disorder is a really long name.
Well, the first... the criteria of antisocial personality disorder is lying and deceptive manipulative behavior for your own self-amusement. So it's not because you are in a state of distress. Like with Histrionic, Ron Burgundy, I'll go back to him as a good example. In that movie in Anchorman, whenever he acts out and acts like a dick, it's because he's freaking out about something. He's like, but I'm the best anchorman that's ever been. And he's like, so screw you. And he's screws up people's lives because he's in a panic.
Right.
Whereas with Regina, I think the other good example for antisocial argument is the scene where her friend Gretchen, so fetch, likes that guy Jason, and they see him with another girl at the mall. And so Regina has no personal investment in this. She doesn't really seem like she cares about Gretchen. Of course she doesn't care about some rando dude that Gretchen used to be hanging out with. But she makes a point of calling that other girl's mom and making the other girl's mom think that this girl has an STD. And sufficely sort of ruining that girl's life for that small amount of time for no reason. She doesn't look excited even after she does it or before she does it. She's just like, this is something to do. In a very flat way that would be very unsettling as someone working with her. It does seem like the lack of remorse is very...
She just doesn't seem escalated. She doesn't seem like she's in distress when she's making these decisions and doing this kind of garbage kind of stuff that she's doing to people. So I think the lack of remorse is one thing that I really found with her. Also, the deceitfulness that's for pleasure mostly, and a pattern and disregard for violation of and the rights of others. Just in general, she just doesn't really care about anyone else and doesn't have any problem showing that to you. Cheating,
taking boys away from other girls, ruining their reputations.
Being rude to her mother, being rude to literally everyone, making her parents move out of their bedroom. I mean, look, there's definitely some environmental factors going on in this girl's life where the way that her parents are parenting her are just boosting up all of this
that's
garbage.
the big...
And that's really where kind of the difference between Histrionic and Antisocial.
But I think that's a good thing to point out, which is something you'd really want to figure out as the therapist, especially working with someone younger, is this child, I'll call her a child, acting this way because it's all coming from within and this is how they choose to be and this is all very internally motivated? Or is it because they have a mom that is a cool mom, not a regular mom, and really wants to be liked by her daughter and lets her daughter railroad her and probably has a lot of motivations that are materialistic and superficial and kind of pushing those values onto her daughter? I mean, whenever I see a younger person in a movie like this, my first thought is always, I want to meet these kids' parents.
Yep.
Because usually if you see these kind of behavior, especially in a younger person, even in an older person, you're sure as shit going to see their parents do probably very similar behaviors. And you see in this,
Absolutely.
The way that Regina treats her parents, the fact that she gets their master bedroom, easy peasy. And even, her sister is, pretending, watching Girls Gone Wild, I think, in the beginning, and, pretending to flash the TV.
Right, and mom's
and
offering
she's,
alcohol.
9. It tells you, it's a really telling about that this household has no boundaries, has no expectations really, and it's all very permissive and very social based in terms of social clout based. Even within her mom, it's do you like me energy, which I encounter a lot when I work with kids. Is that can be one of the biggest barriers, is working with a parent who really struggles to not be liked by their child. And I go, girl, sometimes you got to sacrifice your relationship now to have a good relationship later, and also to have a kid who's not a dick. I mean, I don't call the kids I work with that, but I'll be like, do you want to have? Because when I work with children, let's say, that are kind of malicious, like Regina's presenting, what I'll tell the parents is do you think this is going to magically stop when the kid turns 15 or 18 or 21? This is going to keep going with all the other people in their lives, and it might mutate into abuse.
Right, it's going to become a pervasive pattern.
Yeah, and so
it
do we
dictates
wanna...
how she interacts with people for the rest of her life. And so
Yeah,
it's your responsibility to intervene on that early and start going, we need to teach you socially appropriate behaviors now, and not, I don't need to be your friend, I don't need to be your best friend, like, we need to get along and we need to have a relationship, but there also has to be firm boundaries on who's the parent, who's the child, and we have to maintain that.
Well, it's like, are you willing to sacrifice your relationship now to raise a good person?
And also, I think one of the things that Regina probably doesn't meet is that there is this component of going against laws as well, like definitely doing things that could get her arrested. And so that is something that we probably don't see, but let me tell you, based on the fact that she doesn't think that she has to answer to anybody, I'm pretty sure she's going to end up with some legal issues as she gets older.
Or maybe
and then
not
also
because she's rich and white.
That she won't have any problems because her parents can just pay for it and or whatever, or she won't get in trouble because she doesn't need anything because she has everything that she needs.
I mean, I think she's a clear example of a movie character in that I feel like, in my opinion, as the in-between person, the middleman, is I think she fits more of the histrionic, but I think that her
That's not
total...
being in the middle, Brittany.
Well, no. Wait. Well, you let me finish. But her total lack of remorse and detachment from the things she does is so off-putting when you really look at it for the eyes of a therapist, is really uncomfortably unsettling, that... she doesn't fit either, in my opinion, because she doesn't do enough of the stuff in Antisocial to really put her there, but also she's too what we call flat or detached, I think, to be histrionic, because a lot of histrionic, the way it presents, is very like worked up. Yeah,
and not always though. You have to think about, like, I don't want to paint a picture here like people who are histrionic are always like that. It's when,
but I guess
they want to be the center of attention. They're gonna sweep into the room and be like, and my turn. Right now, hi, I'm here, and they might really enjoy that level of attention and behavior. And if you see someone who's like that, they can't not do that. Yeah. It's not like a person who has a flair for the dramatic. That doesn't mean that they're on the verge of a personality disorder. Like people who've been in theater communities before know people who can come into these rooms and like, the theater is here. That's not meaning they have a personality disorder. It's the people who they're on all the time, can't turn it off.
Well, I guess
ever.
Here's a good question. So what makes her feel to us to be unsettling, or like over the edge of just being kind of like a horrible person, and more someone who feels like they have a mental health issue? And I think for me, it's more of the antisocial argument, which is that she does things that she has no investment in just to be malicious. And I think... and it's at some point in her life, it's going to affect... I mean, it already does. It affects her relationship with others. She gets, like... I know the hit by the bus thing is karma, but that doesn't come into play with your consequences. But some say her head went all the way around. But I think I would argue that she'll never have a reciprocal healthy relationship. It would be interesting what it looks like once she starts working in a job where she has to answer to a boss. Like, that'd be more where... that's why we say you don't really get diagnosed with this. You don't ever get diagnosed with this until you're an adult.
Especially not that one.
Until you're an adult, is because that's usually when you're out from under the umbrella of your parents, and now your behaviors and how you interact with others really has a consequence to your life and what we call your functioning. Because all these diagnoses it has to be impacting your functioning in a significant way. Either you can't go to work, you're getting fired a lot, you can't keep a relationship. Like, that's also a big part of being diagnosed with something like this, where it's significant enough that you'd get treatment and get the diagnosis.
Yeah, and it's also when somebody would come in. Like, the chances of this Regina coming in, never going to happen.
She'd get arrested, and then they'd say, because you're so pretty and rich and white, you can go to therapy and not juvie or jail. And then she'd have to see a therapist. But then I don't know if she would be... she'd probably put on an act. She'd put on a glossy version of herself.
She'd manipulate the therapist. If she's truly one of these...
if she truly has one of these,
she would manipulate. And I think what becomes clear to us is, like, as we talk about this, and what becomes so difficult about diagnosing personality disorders is because of the cluster things. Because any of these things we talked about could also be attributed to narcissism. too, right? So you can't rule that out, which is part of this cluster. What she doesn't show is really any of the borderline tendencies, except that she's questionably demonstrating traits of anorexia with her obsession with weight. She's already quite thin.
That's the preoccupation with appearance as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's lines that are very blurry with these four. So what I think we can all agree on is that she is definitely a cluster B symptom presenter.
For sure. So if you want to hear more about this kind of stuff, we have I think 12 episodes now. We're doing our Halloween episodes as we speak. We just recorded Psycho last night. We released Sixth Sense this past Monday. But we get into all these personality disorders, like we do Fatal Attraction and we talk about borderline at length. So if you're really interested in hearing more of this stuff, when we talk about treatment, you can find us at Popcorn Psychology on iTunes, all those regular platforms. We have a Facebook, Instagram, Popcorn Psychology, and we're on Twitter at popcorn_psych.
Yeah. You always say that part with the question mark at the end. So I think you're always unsure about whether or not that's correct.
Ooh.
Anybody have any questions while we're turning down?
All right, so you first and then you.
I got a couple questions. I'll go next one.
Okay.
Is it like a typical conversation with you guys since all y'all are under the same field? Is it like hard or, if y'all start getting into a big debate about it?
Sometimes we do. Sometimes we walk in the room and we look at each other and we go, this thing, and we're all like, yeah, that thing. And then so that becomes the topic, whatever like that diagnosis is or whatever, if it's trauma. Because we don't necessarily like diagnose a character and that's what we talk about. Sometimes we just talk about what are the effects of trauma? What are the effects of inappropriate relationships? Like with Psycho, we just talked about, it was all about like the dynamics with a parent who might be inappropriate. And so sometimes we disagree, and we'll get into it on the show. We have a big argument in Batman because we think he's suicidal, and he's really in love with Batman, so that hurt his heart.
Disagree. Hard disagree.
Whatever.
Okay, so yes.
This is a brilliant idea.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks.
Also a great name.
Thank you.
Really great name. And personally, I would argue narcissistic personality disorder. But I do have a psychology question.
Sure.
Is 18 a magic number or is it an insurance number?
I don't really
it's a
know.
research number.
Okay.
Like if I were to, so one of the things I would make sure, like you would see people be uncomfortable diagnosing some personality disorders before age 18. The one that has it actually straight written into the criteria is for antisocial, because before 18 it would be conduct disorder.
Yeah.
The other ones you generally won't see it, but if you go to certain facilities, like especially ones that focus on it, you may find clients that are like 16, 14, 15, in that range that might get diagnosed with borderline.
What they'd get diagnosed with, they would write on their records, they exhibit borderline tendencies, but they wouldn't give them a diagnosis because they can't. But honestly, for me, like, especially with how, not to get in a whole other topic, but advanced adolescence as we're going through right now, where people are kind of still really childlike until 25 more now. And it's like
Or
living with
30
their
for
parents
them.
and stuff. That I don't even know if I would diagnose them with personality disorder until maybe well into their 20s and 30s. Just because there are also many environmental factors you have to wean out, especially if they're still living at home. What's their parents like? What's that deal? How have they gotten rewarded, throughout their life? Like, is this behavior supported?
So the number's kind of bullshit.
It's just all that stuff is like
It's
comes
based
from
on a
somewhere, but I don't think it's irresponsible because kids are developing the personality still, and they're so like sponges. And so to say that they're doing this because that's something they can't help themselves doing is, I think, irresponsible.
Nice to meet you too.
Especially with somebody who's young,
Yeah,
that
quite
it might
mom.
be more
Yeah,
trauma.
quite mom. Thank
And
you.
that once we get to the root of that, the other thing we would like to show is important about having all three of us on here is that we're all different therapists. So there's a chance these are all subjective things that part of being a therapist is also having supervision and coming into a room and saying, hey, I have this client and she's doing these really intentional things. What do you guys think? And how can I'm feeling stuck.
Yeah, and another therapist might say something, and you're like, "Oh shit, that
Right.
is the thing."
Right.
And then,
That's why we like to show that we have these discussions and you're
Yeah.
not in a vacuum as
Yeah.
a therapist, and that's really not the best, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys
Yeah,
think,
I'd
but
agree.
In my opinion, it's not a good idea or really
To work in a
ethical
vacuum?
to work in a vacuum
No,
as a
no,
therapist
no.
because there's so many different things you can be missing and so many
don't know when your own trash is coming into the conversation when you're working with somebody. I think, did you have a question? Okay. Or do you have a question? Sorry.
But
Yeah.
you know what? We're
Oh.
we have the lobby. Like, we made the lobby so that you can all
Okay.
continue
So-
conversations because we love you guys to all be up. Thank you so much.
The outcome of Brexit may not be certain, but one thing is clear. Your business could face serious challenges. Enterprise Ireland's wide range of supports will help you plan, innovate, compete and diversify. Speak to your Enterprise Ireland Development Advisor or visit prepareforbrexit.ie, an initiative of the Government of Ireland.